Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this live session where we're discussing about brand building and whether brand building is a necessity for new age brands and new age businesses as such. This live session is actually brought to you by ET Brand Equity in partnership with Tricycle. Tricycle, as you all might know, is a branding agency for new age businesses. As you all know that there is hardly anyone you might who might not have heard about branding and the overall sense that it makes for all of us. Businesses reach out to a larger set of people using branding and inform them about the name of the organization, the individual, and basically craft their identity for themselves. But there are some very pertinent questions when it comes to branding that needs to be asked before an organization or an individual embarks on this journey. The questions are like, when do we start the branding exercise? Is my brand ready for starting this journey? What are the budgets that are needed to, embark on this journey? And should a brand or a company develop in-house expertise or, outsource the branding exercise to an external agency? Today, we are going to deep dive into all these aspects of brand building and understand why it is necessary for startups and new age businesses to embark on this journey. While these players spend most of the time in perfecting their product, it's actually very important to start developing a market for it and creating a persona for the brand name. Today, we will hear from our industry stalwarts and our esteemed panelists how these ventures and these businesses who have got their product right in the first place are going about building their brand and going about embarking on the overall journey of brand building. It is my great honor to introduce my esteemed panel of experts today, introducing Mr. Saurabh Marda, co-founder and managing director at Freyr. Welcome, Saurabh. Mr. Utsav Malhotra, Chief Operating Officer at Noise. Welcome, Utsav. Mr. Mayank Sangani, Chief Business Officer, LoanTap Financial Technologies. Welcome, Mayank. And we also have Mr. Samyadeep, Founder and Chief Strategy Officer at Tricycle. So welcome, gentlemen, and thank you so much for agreeing to find out time and basically discuss this pertinent topic of brand building and helping us and our audiences understand the brand building cycle better. So before I start this panel, I'll really request my audiences here to feel free to pose their questions and pose their thoughts, and we will get them answered by our experts in the panel. So before we start, so I would really want to come to my brand custodians in this panel today, and really want to understand, right, where does brand building stand in their entire scheme of organizational structure, right, and organizational journey and their brand journey as such. So we can start with Saurabh here. Saurabh, if you can just quickly give us a quick background about Freyr, and then look into take us through your branding journey and where does branding stand for your company.
Sure. Thanks, Satrajit. So Freyr is a Hyderabad-based rooftop solar company. We design and install rooftop solar systems for residential and small-scale commercial industrial clients across the country. Our prospective customers are spread across 3,000 cities and towns, and the reason I'm mentioning that is I'll come to why for us branding becomes critical and this plays a role. So why does a person today purchase a rooftop solar system? The selling proposition is fairly straightforward. For every 1 lakh rupees that you invest, you're going to save between 25 and 30,000 rupees a year for the next 25 years, right? And it's clean power, it's reliable. That's the selling proposition. So till there, it's very straightforward, right? For us, sort of, coming to the part around what was unique about us, there are thousands of rooftop solar companies in India today. What's unique about us is, the fundamental challenge that we've gone out to address, which is one of, in this sector, you have two basic challenges. One is creating customer awareness. Most people don't know the difference between rooftop solar system that generates electricity and a solar system that's like solar thermal, right? Water heater. You don't know the difference between the two. So awareness is super critical. And the second part is customer experience. This is a system that has to work for 25 years. The whole process of exploring whether solar is right for you, ordering a system, and then sort of experiencing it. How do you make sure that that works out the way you intended to for any customer in any of these 3,000 cities and towns? So those were the problems that we set out to address. And it requires a combination of a ground game and our own proprietary software technology that we developed. So that's fundamentally what's differentiated us, right? So it's a combination of these two things. This is what we do. In terms of our brand journey, so far, our first few years, were spent more on getting whatever orders you could, right? Stay afloat, have some capital with you, refine the products as you go along. It's really been in the last year and a half or so, actually in the middle of COVID was when we started our big branding exercise. And, sort of coincided that with the launch of the product that we developed on the technology front. And that's basically made a substantial difference for us, right? Just in terms of awareness, in terms of, customers reaching out to us. I'll give you a perspective. In the last year, we're now doing like 6x more residential solar business than we were doing last year, same time, right? And in terms of the engagement with the client, where earlier we used to spend 3 months on an average between meeting a prospective customer and convincing them to hey, take up a rooftop solar system. We've now gotten that timeline down to 2 weeks on an average, right? So these things become critical when you start looking at how do I scale, what do I do. So that's a bit about us and our brand journey so far. And as we go along, I'll answer more questions.
Correct. These are pertinent points because you mentioned about creating an identity with the product first, and that is something that we are gradually looking into how businesses and especially the new age businesses are addressing that. So great point to start with, Saurabh. I would now want to move to Utsav here. So Utsav, we all have seen Noise, right, grow from a startup to a brand, right? And most of us and many of us here, I believe, would be using your products here. So, give us a little bit about the background of Noise, right? And just quickly touching upon, what are the pillars that Noise is looking at currently, and how did branding help you become the brand that you are currently, right?
So thank you, Satrajit. I think the fact that you acknowledge and recognize Noise as a brand is half the work done. Something must have been done right for that acknowledgement to have happened. But and it's ironic that if I get into the trope of actually having to introduce the brand per se, clearly we'll be missing a few pieces there. But for the benefit of those who are not aware of Noise, Noise is one of the leading wearables and hearables business. We're in the business of connected lifestyle. Over the last 5 quarters, we've remained India's #1 smartwatch brand. And that's a fair, significant achievement for an Indian, designed in India, homegrown brand in an environment that's fundamentally cluttered with players from other countries. So that's pretty much us. But to a large extent, I'll actually take a cue from what Saurabh was saying, that the fact is that for most startups, being frugal doesn't hurt, right? You are cash strapped, the challenges, you're wanting to leverage free, earned, any kind of organic branding that you can possibly get. There is a constant pressure of maximizing the spend. So you're looking at metrics of ROAS and ACOS and CAC and things of that order, just to be efficient with what you are spending. And that's normal. I mean, and I wouldn't say it's any different, because especially for us being a consumer brand, for us, everything is about reaching that consumer. And therefore, branding seems like the inadvertent choice. But being a bootstrap business, even till this scale, uh, we were wise with some of our choices. And I think it's important to understand why that is critical, because the right bit is really timing it. Because you realize that the product inadvertently will go through an iterative process. Whatever product each of us believes in will actually evolve with time. The consumer feedback will make you go through that journey. There will be a learning curve when it comes to optimizing your performance spends. It's bound to happen. None of us will get that right on day one. You realize that some of these spends are normal for you to have. Your operations will take time getting right. You will make those teething mistakes. But brand spends, once spent, don't come back, right? That's a sheer burn that the system goes through. And therefore timing it right is important, so that you're actually not firing it out during these early stages. And there is that constant dichotomy of, how do I get the brand story out? How do I build credibility around the brand, especially when there are one too many coming up? How do you go about with maximizing your efficiencies, because the brand spend is likely to augment the performance spend? So those are questions that keep coming about. The fact really is that, is branding essential? Of course it is, and no two questions about it, because that's how the flywheel works, right? It's a double flywheel where your top of the funnel widening allows you the leverage to make those mistakes of lower conversions or higher a costs. So you have to allow yourself the benefit of that. But I think for a startup, it's important to be wise with how you are spending those monies. It's important to allow yourself innovative tools and means to deliver the brand message, to storytell, and then get the branding cylinders firing when you know you've got your bases covered. And that's been the journey for us. Till about a year ago, our spends on branding were very minimal, and we've been very efficient with our performance. We just realized that our impact quadrupled the moment we opened the taps on branding. And that's been the journey so far. And I'm sure during the course of this conversation, I can share some of more anecdotes to help the others.
Sure. Thanks, Utsav. I think, you touched a very pertinent point of, deciding on the smart, especially when you're operating in a huge competitive sector. Uh, so we're talking about the competitive sector, and, this brings me to Mayank, actually. Mayank, LoanTap, loan services, financial services, we all know how competitive it is, right? So one is obviously, the LoanTap journey, a quick, overview of the LoanTap journey, and then why do you think, and where do you see branding, helping you in your entire, organizational, journey as such? Because as we all said, and that financial services are always very competitive and very dynamic market.
Correct. So at LoanTap, as most of us would know that it is in a fintech space, technology becomes a differentiator. Digital lending is what we are into, and when we started the journey on the brand, what we thought is what will be our differentiator. Okay, so we pose that question. There are multiple lending players in the market. How will LoanTap be different? So at LoanTap, we were very clear that we are going after the salaried class and the millennials. So we had to customize the product in such a way that it suits their requirement. It is we called it EMI free loans. Okay, so there is no EMI. You pay interest every month, and then when a salaried person gets an incentive or a bonus, then he does the bullet payment, or at the end of the loan tenure period, he makes the payment. So that choice is completely left to the customer, and that was the differentiator we started with. And we went after millennials, and it paid off in a big way. And I would say branding is not just for our customers; it also has equal importance internally for employees, for partners, for investors to know what we stand for and what we are going after. It also helps us differentiate from the other peer group, I would say.
Correct, Mayank. So I think, you again touched upon a very pertinent point, that is, differentiation. And differentiation is basically the key in a very competitive market. So all these points. So now I would really want to come to Samyadeep here. So Samyadeep, you have been working very closely with new age businesses and startups and people who are just beginning there or just starting their branding journey, right? So we have heard Utsav, Saurabh, and Mayank speak about different aspects. So Utsav was mentioning about how to decide on the smart spends or smart branding spends. Mayank touched upon the importance of differentiation and importance of creating a unique product. So, in your experience of working with so many people and so many brands and businesses, one, what do you see is the right time for any business to go into a branding exercise or to embark on a branding exercise journey? That's one. And secondly, what are the kind of key parameters? We heard about different parameters from different brands that one need to keep in mind while going to a branding journey.
Right. So, firstly, I'm very glad that we all have come together to discuss this topic. Right. That's the starting point, according to me. In course of our experience, what we have seen is, there needs to be a little bit of a finer understanding of what branding is to go about evaluating it and to go about understanding how it is going to be applicable to your respective businesses. The first question is, what everyone else has said, if branding is necessary, the answer is absolutely yes, right? But at the same time, it's also very important to understand what you want to get out of it. Why would you want to go about doing that, right? In course of our experience with new companies, that's a dilemma. I mean, that's something that always one faces, that is this the right time to start? So if you were to divide that into two aspects, one aspect would be the brand creation part, where you are going about creating a projection for your vision, for what you are all about, the purpose of your entity. So that is one part of it. The other part of it, when you are taking that, narrative to an audience, which is the brand communication part of it. In course of the journey, there is a point in time where you know that, okay, the creation part of it, takes precedent, and we first got to take care of that. You need to have a compelling story, coming from your side. And as we progress, as the traction happens, as you go out in the market, you realize that, the scaling up story is actually going about, invariably goes about defining how would you go and expose, the narrative to an audience. So, the right time, of course, when you know that you are wanting to pursue a vision, you are sure about the vision per se. That's the time you should go about thinking seriously about a projection, about the brand creation part of it. As we progress, Saurabh said, Utsav has also said that, there are going to be certain changes, there are going to be pivots, there are going to be certain transformation and evolution of the journey itself. So the narrative should be in a position to accommodate that, but still be able to, give a projection which gives confidence to an audience and brings your customers together. We spoke about differentiation. Mayank also spoke about internal stakeholders, how branding is not just necessary for an external audience, but it is very vital to get the team together and to believe in a common vision that one is pursuing. So yes, so this is what would be my submission, that branding is important whenever, right from the day you start. The scale of it or the extent of it is something that gets, evolved as we progress.
Thanks, Amadeep. I think it's a great note to start with, actually, and you rightly mentioned about how important branding is. And I think, all of us in the panel and all our audiences also agree to that. Just that, we want to basically diversify and deep dive into how to's of, and knowing of branding. So before I go to the next set of questions, I would really, again, request my audiences. I'm seeing a lot of questions coming in. We would really want more questions for all our, panelists here. So we are open. We're opening. I mean, we'll be opening it up for questions right after the panel discussion is over. So moving on to the next question, and my question is again to Saurabh here, right? So Saurabh, we all have read about the growing importance of solar energy in the entire context of how India as a country is growing, and how energy efficiency is one of the key pillars of growth in this developing economy, right? So in this entire frame of things, right, and when you are talking about branding, uh, as Freyr Energy, right, what are the kind of media mix you look at when you want to reach into, say, a specific geography, or a specific part of India where you want to be the market leaders?
So I'll let me just answer this question, sort of giving you guys a timeline perspective also. I think it's important. For us, the whole branding journey was one of trial and error. Okay. We started off with a product that people didn't know about. Now you read about it in the papers every day. A few years ago, it was, what is this? What are you trying to sell? The other element that was, that became clear to me. So, for example, I'm an engineer first, right? The other element that became clear to me over time was, as an engineer, some metrics are very clear, right? It's mostly binary. But with branding, that was not the case. The things that became clear to us over time, and to me specifically, was with branding, there's no shortcuts, right? There's zero. If it is going to take 2 years, it is going to take 2 years. There is no way to throw more money at the problem, circumvent it, do something else. It's not how this works, especially for us. And two, you have to be patient. This is not one of those things where you get up one day in the morning and decide, I want to do something today with branding. I'm feeling very optimistic. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, oh shit, I'm down on cash flow. Sorry, I don't know if I can use that language, but I'm down on cash flow, so no more branding, right? That's not how it has to be. Consistent, systematic. It's something that has to. And I think I'm grateful that my marketing team was patient with me, the marketing team, to make sure that I got these concepts. So that's the first part. Now, in terms of media mix, right? For us, it's a very peculiar kind of a situation, because you're spread across, your client base is across 3,000 odd cities and towns. Today, we have customers in 24 states, right? We've deployed over 2,000 odd systems. And our media mix at this point in time is primarily online. First, the way we sell systems, or the way the branding happens, is primarily online. And the secondary part that becomes crucial is the people who are representing us on the ground. So we have people that we call channel partners who sell systems on our behalf. So they're also representing us. They're in these small cities and towns. They also end up becoming the face of the company. What they represent, how they talk, how they come across to the customer matters. So selecting those channel partners is very crucial. But it's primarily online, and this effort on the ground. And we've sort of added things like, we got, so we had Dia Mirza sort of speak about the technology, get the word out, things like that. So that's something that we started only late last year, and we're going to continue building on that. So it's, that's really our media mix. We've tried offline, but in our case, what we found is that that's probably not that's not an optimal use of our funds in this case. So this is our approach right now. The third element that I just want to talk about, media mix is easy to speak of, but I look at it more as a mix, not just media. And the third element is our customers itself. So every time we did a good job, we got a referral, and that was an easier order to close the next one, right? So even today, after 7 years of being in business, cumulatively, we still have a 50% referral rate. Right, so it's our existing customers also that's like super critical. They're a part of our sort of branding exercise out there. When they speak well about us, everything else sort of is just sort of it's going to fall in place. Everything moves quickly. So this has been this is what our media mix looks like. I hope I've answered your question.
Correct, and very pertinent points about your attaining to your already existing customers, and how this has to be looked at as a branding part itself, because a lot of things, there's small things that matter in brand journey, right? So Utsav, I would really want to come to you here, right? And you mentioned about smart spends on branding, right? We have heard how Saurabh has had strategized their spends on branding, and has been patient with his marketing team there. So what's your take? So noise is still I mean, the stage that noise is in, the initial stages are by far a little bit away here, right? And how have you basically strategized it, and what were your decisions when that really acted as smart in the spend cycle?
Sure, sure. And Satrajit, I'm going to answer that. And there is one question that Rishi apparently had asked, and I'll try and answer the two together for you.
Sure.
In terms of how do we strategize and how do we, in a heavily cluttered space, find a little voice for ourselves where there are big giants literally competing for the same share of voice. Two parts to this. The first bit is that in terms of the DNA of the organization, when we were set up, we were very clear that we'll be a strong, community driven, consumer centric brand. We were not set up with the idea of it being a consumer electronics brand that will just go about rampantly distributing products. In fact, that's representative in the DNA when it comes to the product itself. So every single product that we make is effectively a solution that we come up with based on insights, having interacted with our consumers. And for Samyadeep, it might sound very rudimentary, but we're probably one of those rare brands that even till date engage in focus groups almost on a 10-day basis with our consumers. And Zoom has just made life simpler, but speaking to them to figure out where the need gaps truly are. And the fact that our last almost 20 launches have been on the back of insights that the consumers kept giving us, and have met with that much more success. Uh, the difference also was, and this is probably pertinent and slightly different from everybody else, is that whilst we switched the tap on in terms of amplification, they were large questions that we're trying to grapple with, right? The sheer mindset of where to prioritize spends, and I think that's what Saurabh was talking about. Do you do it yourself, or do you go ahead with an agency, and do you have that luxury of balancing the two? How much money do you spend on content and how much on amplification? And in today's day and age, where content in itself has just become a strategy for most brands, you have to strike that balance. The only advantage that we had was that on day one, we didn't get to opening stores, we didn't go out to marketplaces, we set up our own digital footprint by having our own e-commerce website. So the fact that we had our own e-store as the first step, and that was thought out, right? We wanted to be engaged with the consumer, we wanted that feedback firsthand to be able to get our nuts and bolts in order. So that platform itself allowed us the liberty and the luxury of understanding what the consumer was saying, taking that feedback. But more importantly, we had a platform where we could storytell. Unlike any other platform where there's a lot of clutter, this was truly a niche brand platform where we could storytell. The second bit is that as a brand, we were cognizant that we wanted to keep this dialogue going. So our app, which is one of a kind native app, where every single customer eventually leverages and maximizes the product on the app, becomes a great two-way channel for that consumer. So some of those nuts and bolts that are very difficult for consumer brands to plug and get a read on consumer data became a lot easier for us on in terms of how we set the platform up. The second bit is, there's no shame admitting that we were one of those brands that really leverage social media and the voice of it to drive the brand messaging, and it was probably the most efficient use for us. The third bit was that when we went to marketplaces, and this is very relevant in today's context for most consumer brands, that and Amazon is doubling up for a search engine when it comes to people looking for products, right? Instead of people going to a Google, they go to an Amazon and start looking for a product when they're buying with the consideration of a category. So brand spends on some of those platforms really helped us leverage our presence and got us to solidify our impact. And having done all of this, I think typically leveraged in driving cohesion across channels, and the message was consistent, which allowed us breaking through the clutter.
Right. I think, you touched upon a very pertinent point, which actually helped in your deciding the smart spending. And that is, one of the bigger areas of discussion today as well, where whether, you should outsource your branding activity, or you should, develop an in-house expertise. We'll come to that, and we would rather, come to all of you in the panel and really take your inputs here. But before that, I would really want to come to Mayank here. Mayank, you interestingly, you mentioned about the importance of differentiation, right, and in the importance of creating your own identity in this cluttered market, right? So if you can just give us a like deep view of the background work that really has gone on to creating the LoanTap branding journey here, right? And then maybe we can talk on to the nitty-gritties further.
Sure. Thanks, Satrajit. So we are in a very, like I said, very exciting space, happening space, fintech, digital lending. The market itself is growing, I would say, it has almost doubled in the last 4 years. There are multiple players that are coming in. Of course, there is room because of such a high growth rate. There is room for many, but you have to constantly adapt and be ahead of the curve. Okay, so the ongoing developments cannot stop, whether it is for compliance, whether it is for customer need, etc. Increasingly, what we are doing is we started while from the personal loan towards a specific target. We are now moving towards our vision and mission is to constantly take effort towards the complete financial inclusion. Okay, and customer behavior is changing. Okay, that's one of the key aspects. Earlier, people used to spend from their saving if the need arises or if the emergency arises. They were very conservative about taking credit. But today, that trend is changing. That trend is changing towards liquidity. So rather than touching my savings or earnings, I would rather, based on need, whether it is wedding or travel or home improvement or basis that need, I will take a short-term, credit line and move ahead, so that I don't have to, necessarily liquidate my this thing. So with that in mind, we have simplified the same for the customers. The way we have done it is, one, the process has to be really fast. Okay, because customers need it now. Today, if the customer needs today, he will tell you probably today morning. Okay, so the speed matters. Flexibility in repayments as per their choice. Okay, and the third critical is the product have to be friendly and customized. So these are the three pillars on which we are building the brand going forward in our journey so far. And our latest product, which is limitless card, is like a pre-approved credit line card, which is money in your wallet anytime that you want to spend for any of your need. The limits can go up to as high as 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs credit line pre-approved. Okay, and interest is charged only when you spend, not the other way. With after the interest-free period is over. Okay, and to add to the personal loan portfolio, we have now ventured into MSME loans, and electric two-wheelers is a big focus area for us going forward.
Right, Mayank. I think you have given a good outlay about your the thought that goes behind after in creating your products. And I also believe just to add to the question, I know, and building on to Utsav's point on whether it's a smart move to basically create those expertise, right? Branding expertise and understanding consumer insight expertise in-house. How do you how you as LoanTap, how are you looking at it?
So smart spend. So there are two ways you can, if and it depends upon what stage you are and at what scale you are. So if you go after awareness, then it is like, huge marketing dollars that you need to spend. What we instead do is we'll go after the shopper who is interested in taking a loan. So it is shopper versus out there carpet bombing. So it is a difficult choice that every organization has to make, and we are more focused on the performance side of it as of now, and going after shoppers rather than consumers.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned about performance, because performance has quite become the keyword here whenever it comes to marketing, leave aside branding, right? So Samyadeep, I really want to come to you here, right? And we have heard about Utsav, we have heard Mayank talking about, like deciding on the smart spends, and thus creating an in-house expertise, and creating further strengthening the in-house team and creating the expertise within our organizations. Now you have been working closely with a lot of brands. So why do you see, and where are the strengths of and what are the advantages for a brand to really outsource it to a partner like you, or whosoever it may be, right? And what are the added advantages that you bring into the table for a brand here, as far as branding is concerned?
Right. So I would come to that question, but I want to pick up on something that Saurabh had said, which is very, very important, and I think we as an audience need to acknowledge that. Patience and clarity. Utsav mentioned clarity. In a way that how they decided that they're going to have their digital store first, and get a lot of insights and be ready for the rollout later on. So these two things are very, very important, right? When you are starting out, and when you are looking at branding as a strategic activity, you're going to understand that what is that you want to achieve from it. So that clarity is something which is very important, to have the right goals in place, internal, external, all customer, stakeholder, everything has to be mapped in terms of an expectations first, right? Thereafter, when you go and set your foot into the entire process of getting it implemented, you need to understand that this is something that, like Saurabh said, it takes time, and we got to be patient with it. More often than not, when we interact with, new age companies and founders, there is an understanding in terms of what this is, but the patience and the clarity is something that probably is not there at the start. It only comes in as we progress. So this is something which is very, very important, and we need to acknowledge that. Also, another question that that had come up from the audience is that sometimes the product, okay, or the tech deck or the tech platform, it takes precedence. So when you're starting off, you know that everything is around that particular piece, and isn't that the most important thing? The answer is, of course, it is, right? But along with that, it's equally important to build the narrative around it. Okay. So the balance has to be kind of looked at, where a technology or product, the concentration on that is given its due importance, but at the same time you also go about investing in building the right narrative for it. When both of them come together, that's when you know that you're having a piece of communication that's going to work. Now, coming to your question, in terms of should it be in-house or should it be outsourced? It all depends on the kind of capability that an organization has within itself. With an external entity, what happens? The most important thing is objectivity, right? Sometimes you are too close to things, and there might be even if one doesn't want, there might be certain biases which come in. Right. And when you have someone who is from outside, who has gone about interacting with a lot of other players, across sectors, the diversity of the thinking of the experience surely comes and adds value to the entire engagement. Having said that, it all depends on how you go about putting your pieces together. The best foot forward would be probably to see if both this two options actually converge and if they can work together. Because, after a point in time, it's good to ensure that, you have got assistance, by your side, so that, once scaling happens, once you go about doing too many things, then branding should not be something that, does not get importance. So it is something that would require investment of time, energy, and of course, money all throughout. So the best, possibility would be, yes, to have an external, partner who understand the business, who understand what this is all about, who can come and complement in internal capability if one has one.
Great. Thanks, Samyadeep. So, in any case, right, be it in-house or be it outsourced, we are talking about investments here, right? And, investments need to be made to create that brand journey and that brand persona. So, this brings me to our next set of questions. And I would really, come to Utsav over here, right? So, Utsav, we are talking about investments here. As a brand leader, as a marketer, wherever there is an investment, you have to have an return on it, the ROI. So how do you gauge the ROI on branding exercises? Like, is there, I mean, what are the parameters of, measurement parameters to really gauge that your investment on branding has really given you the returns, desired returns?
So, very well said, Satrajit, that as marketers, whilst we obsess with brand marketing, we realize that there is a consequence with regards to the spends that comes with it. And you can't help but to constantly keep attributing ROAS and ROI metrics to it. The fact is that there are a few metrics that you have to define for yourself. A clear objective for where the brand is wanting to go, and therefore how those spends were put in, will determine some of these metrics for you. And they may apply to one business and may not to the other. But in our case, things like a spike in organic buyers or organic traffic, stuff like Google or organic searches going up, stuff like, of course, you can rely on brand lift studies and dipsticks and stuff of that order, but things like rate of engagement going up. So there are clear metrics, but the fact is that although attribution becomes a challenge and therefore you need some of those statistical tools, in a nutshell, eventually, if your consumer volume, if your brand noise in search volumes, and generally the revenues are increasing, I think you're on the right path. Attribution is a key, and therefore some of those metrics have to be well defined for you to be able to start putting measures to it. But the fact is that conversion rates going up, organic buyers going up, search volumes going up are very, very clear indicators that what you're doing is falling on right ears.
In this case, do you also, when you speak about search volumes, do you also take into consideration the search that happens on other platforms other than your own?
Yes. Especially now that you've got sophisticated tools that the likes of an Amazon provide you, where you can actually even look at where their consumer came from and what they ended up buying, what the overlaps were. So the more you deep dive and slice and dice this data, I think it just allows for a better perspective and a better realization of where the spends need to be and whether they're being well spent or not.
Correct. Great point, Utsav, actually, so Saurabh, what's the ROI metric in your business, in your case, right? And how do you really, decide whether the spends that you had made are really giving you the desired returns?
It's still a work in progress, the metrics. Just like your product changes or your solution or your value proposition for the customer evolves, the metrics also evolve over time. That's point number one. Point number two for us, I'd say, I'd echo what Utsav mentioned. Things like, if it was earlier taking us 3 months to convince a client to go for a solar system and now it's taking us 2 weeks, then definitely branding has played a role. One thing I just want to highlight over here while we're trying to figure out metrics is, unfortunately, branding, to me, the nearest engineering term I can think of is like a catalyst. You understand, right? The other chemicals have to be in place for the catalyst to work, right? And the right catalyst has to be there at the right time. For us, as of today, things that we look at is, okay, how much time is it taking for us to convert a client? Second is, compared to last year, how many sort of incoming inquiries are we getting? For example, that's up 10x for us compared to where we were last year, right? So that means definitely something has changed, right? The other metric that we also look at is, we've started looking at now is, well, we are talking about technology and how we want to digitalize our entire customer experience, right? From of owning a solar system or the entire solar journey. The other metric that we've started looking at is how many customers are placing an order with us for our solar system without ever meeting any of our representatives in person, right? Because the solar sale is a high engagement sale. You have to meet the client. You end up explaining to them how the whole thing works, etc., and how many times. So that's something that was zero for the first 5 odd years, right? And that number has suddenly started taking off now, right? So these are some metrics that we are regularly measuring at this point in time. What we may look at next year would be different, right? But these are things that we're looking at right now.
Right, that's an interesting metric that you mentioned about, where, how many sales volume is rising up without the really intervention of your sales partners. And on a lighter note, actually, Catalyst has very much become a marketing word. Marketers are overly using Catalyst, and Utsav would agree to that.
Yeah, you guys, I wish us chemical engineers had trademarked that word or something, right?
Well, then, marketers would have come out with a huge array of other words.
Yeah, of course.
Great. So, moving on to Mayank. Mayank, what are the key parameters or key parameters that you attribute to when you decide on the ROI part, whether your branding is really working, whether your investments on branding are really working or not?
Somewhat echo with Utsav and on similar lines. If your direct traffic, people searching LoanTap on Google, is that if that number is increasing, that's one measure. Another measure, of course, is if your loyal customers are staying with you. If your customers are staying with you, then your repeat ratios are higher. Then you know that you're building a brand in the right direction. And over a period of time, I would say that cost of acquiring customer should be on a declining path. That's where you get to know that you are headed in the right direction. And while brand, I would say it is more of a qualitative metric, but these are some of the metrics that are there, whether year-on-year revenues are going up, whether your efficiencies are improving. These are some of the, I would say, surrogates to say that it's working or not working.
Right, that's interesting point you mentioned about this. So, Samyadeep, we heard about different brands and different sectors here, right? Utsav has a different set of KPIs marked for deciding the ROI, whereas Saurabh and Mayank have their unique sets of KPIs. What do you suggest, and what do you suggest your partners would be a best way to really measure the effectiveness of a branding investment that a brand makes?
Right. So actually, if you look at it, it's a mix of everything. So what all our panelists have said, yes, your cost of acquiring a customer should go down. There has to be an awareness about the company or the brand in question. Also, the mind share of the brand has to increase over a period of time. When you are going and engaging in activity like this. Other aspects like your employee morale, I mean, the pride of association that people have with the company, right? That is something that is also an important factor. The quality of hires, okay, in terms of the talent wanting to come and work with an organization like yours, okay. These are very important aspects also. Also, when you're looking at competition coming in, how your existing customers respond to that. I mean, Mayank touched upon that. If they continue to be with you, and like Saurabh said, that if there are strong referrals, that are coming your way, then these are indicators that that there has been some activity which is well received. Of course, there are quantitative ways in which you can find out if there are certain metrics which are performing better. But overall, you got to look at branding from an overall perspective, from a very macro perspective. That okay. Everywhere you are seeing that there is a certain traction that is coming in, and it is coming in adding together, right, to the company's projection, to the way the company is going about projecting itself. And over a period of time, there has to be an incremental growth in everything that one does, right? So one could lay out, depending on your priorities, you could, that you have chalked out, one could say that, okay, these 3-4 matrices are very important, as of now, but that doesn't mean that the others don't matter. Eventually, all of them will have to come together and say that, okay, there has been a transition from point A to point B, and we are now seeing a kind of a strength in terms of where the brand is, present today. Yeah.
Great. Very pertinent point, actually, Samyadeep. And I think, it mainly depends on the nature of business that, that particular brand and that particular, organization is also, because, every new unique business would have their unique set of, parameters. So, we're getting a lot of questions from our audiences. So I'll just, open it up currently. I can see a lot of questions answered already by our, esteemed panelists, but there are some, generic open questions which are like kind of interesting, and I would request any one of you if who would like to attend to it. So I'll read out the question, and whosoever wants to attend to it, please please feel free. So one of our panelists, one of our audiences is asking, and any panelist who take it up, basically, do you really feel that branding takes a backstage in the majority setup scenario, especially when you are going towards creating your product portfolio, and when you are strategizing your product in that sense? So any one of you would want to answer that?
Right. So the question was, does branding take a backseat in majority of the startups, right? I mean, that's the question, if I've understood it right. The answer is, probably one would not like to look at it from that perspective. When you are starting out, there are so many, challenges that, that takes precedence, operation scale, getting the product in place or the technology deck, ready. So sometimes what happens, branding as an idea is something that is there in the mind of the founders. Okay, this is something that is important. Everyone understands that. So there is no debate as far as that is concerned. But the effort that is required to kind of go and implement it is something that most founders are not necessarily, they don't have the mind space to commit to it. Let me put it like that. So as a result of it, while there is a consensus that this is important, sometimes it gets restricted to boardroom discussions or team building kind of sessions, that yes, this is something we should be doing and we should come together and do that. But when it comes to implementation, there are other issues, other operational aspects which come, which obviously get more importance in terms of prioritization. So the ideal way would be to, if you feel that this is important, and that is where the founders need to come and take a stand here and say that if this is something that you are really serious about, then you got to commit to it, and it is going to take some amount of your time and energy to go and plan that, right? And product or technology or anything of that sort is is important, is fundamental, but not without the narrative. So that understanding of prioritization is something which is important. And also the understanding of branding, in course of our experience, what we have come to know, that not necessarily everyone has a very clear understanding of what branding is all about, right? Sometimes you equate it with advertising spends, right? And therefore there is an inertia that okay, this is probably not meant for me, or maybe I could kind of postpone it by some time, and we will kind of look at it once we get there. But that's not necessarily how one should look at it, right? So while the exposure of it or the communication part of it is something that you can control, and that's what should kind of go along with the kind of plan, the business plan that you are kind of pursuing. But to go and create a projection for yourself, to go and define the brand in the first place, is something that is also very fundamental. So I think a good balance between both is what is necessary.
Correct.
Saurabh?
Saurabh, you wanted to make a point here?
Um, I think I'll just build on what Samyadeep said, right? Like, when you're starting a company, you have so many other things for the first sort of 2-3 years, and most of them are, at least in our case, it used to be existential in nature, right? So when you're up against the wall in that manner, right, you're, even if you want to try and get the clarity, you're fighting so many fires on a daily basis that it's a little bit, yes, I would have loved to have the clarity I have now 6 years ago. Probably in my next startup, I'll do it differently, right? But it's also, you need to have that clarity, and but it's very fluid, right? So my sort of thing to sort of input to any person who's looking at starting a company or doing this already and thinking about branding is, don't beat yourself up over, have I got it right or wrong? Is this the right time or whatever else, right? Like, it's a natural process. You have to let it happen. But the critical part to understand is whether you want to do it systematically or it's an inherent part of what you're trying to do. It is there, right? You need to think about it. It's there. Everything doesn't need to have a dollar spent associated with it. But that's the only other thing that I would like to add to what Samyadeep said.
Right. We really have, just time for one more question, so we see a lot of, pertinent questions coming up. So we can rest assure our audiences that we will try and get them, answered by our panelists offline. So one last question that I have, and this is mainly to my brand custodians on the panel here, right? Audiences really want to know, if there are some examples or one lesson in brand management that you have learned after making a mistake, like, a trial and error kind of a thing. So any of you three, like, sort of, my Utsav can take it up. Utsav, you want to
So
go?
I'll take that out, Satrajit. I think one of the problems or mistakes that most of us end up making is that there is a desirous positioning and consumer that you want to chase uh, versus the consumer that there is. And I think brands constantly end up grappling between where you want to be and where you are. If you are able to just strike that right balance of being true to the consumer and going where the consumer is as opposed to everything else, I think the brand spends will end up being a lot more efficient and judicious. And that's something that you only learn once you keep doing it. But don't burn your fingers. Learn it from mistakes that we've all made.
Great. Thanks, Utsav. I assure my audiences will engage with our panelists and, get answers to your questions. Before I hand it over to Samyadeep here, and, Samyadeep, you can just, maybe wrap it up with a quick summarizing note, and, maybe, give us the closing notes. We would really want to, look into a quick video by Tricycle here, and then I'll open it up to Samyadeep. So over to you, Samyadeep.
So I think the discussion that we had today, I think that was fundamental, and it is extremely important that we as a community, we all come together, and we talk about this kind of experiences that we have had. Like Utsav mentioned, that it's always good to share your learning so that the audience and other participants, they can pick on those things and make sure that they don't make those mistakes themselves. So that is one thing. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about was the fact that branding is something that we all should engage in, right? So although there is a consensus in terms of the merit of it, sometimes founders and new companies, they feel that the timing is not right for them, or they want to kind of postpone the plunge that they are taking. And the reason we started Tricycle was predominantly that with so many entrepreneurs, with so many founders, the entire understanding of branding needs to be a little bit more different than what one perceives it to be. So it's important that strategy, design, communication, all of it comes together to create a very cohesive and a very holistic kind of an interpretation. And you could be in any sector. I mean, like we have a great representation today, but the rules of the game or the fundamentals, that it remains the same. Right? The way you go about implementing it is something that varies depending on where you are, what is your, what stage of the journey you are in. So my submission here would be that we should first be open to the idea of branding. We should refrain from thinking that probably if I am a new company or I am still yet to attain that kind of scale, it is not something which is relevant for me. So the relevance is absolutely there, and we should all come together to kind of discuss, share ideas, and find out ways in which we could go about implementing it. But the fundamental thing is that we all want to go about, creating the kind of projections for our respective businesses. And there are definite ways in which we could do that. It's just that, it requires, again, I'm coming back to these two words, clarity, patience, and some amount of intelligence and smart thinking to go about implementing it in the right way.
Great. Thank you, Samyadeep. On that note, I really, thank all my panelists here, Utsav, Mayank, Saurabh, and Samyadeep. Thank you so much for, taking out time today and helping us with understanding what branding stands for businesses. I would really want to thank all my, audiences here for taking out time and joining us today. Until next time, thank you so much.